A little girl offers Shaq O'Neal her sandwich, but she was unprepared for the aftermath of her kind gesture. Lily was the kind of child who noticed things others often overlooked, while other kids might giggle and play without a care. Lily often paused to observe the world around her, paying attention to the small things: a stray cat's twitching tail, the cracks in the sidewalk, or the tired look in a stranger's eyes. She had an innate ability to sense when someone or something needed kindness at just 6 years old. She had a heart far bigger than her little frame. Shaquille O'Neal sat in the back seat of his car, gazing out at the city lights as they blurred past. His driver, accustomed to silence, kept his eyes on the road, while Shaq rested his large hand against the window. Outside, the streets buzzed with life, families walking hand in hand, couples laughing as they crossed the roads, and kids chasing each other on bicycles. Inside the car, it was quiet. Too quiet. Shaq's fame had brought him almost everything anyone could dream of: money, success, adoration. But at that moment, he felt a hollow ache deep inside. Over the years, he had given to countless charities, surprised strangers with random acts of kindness, and shared his wealth in ways most couldn't imagine. But in giving so much to others, he realized he had forgotten to take care of himself. He sighed heavily, his large frame sinking into the seat as if weighed down by an invisible burden. Despite the towering presence that once made him a legend on the basketball court, he felt small. A few hundred miles away, in a modest 2-bedroom apartment on the edge of a quiet town, 6-year-old Lily danced across the living room. She twirled in her faded pink tutu, her laughter filling the tiny space. Her mother, Sarah, watched her from the kitchen, smiling as she stirred a pot of soup on the stove. "Be careful, Lily," Sarah warned gently, her voice warm but firm. "I don't want you slipping on the carpet again." "I won't, Mama," Lily promised, though her twirling only became faster. She didn't notice the scuff marks her old ballet slippers left on the floor, nor did she care. In Lily's world, the little apartment wasn't small or modest. It was magical. Sarah wiped her hands on a towel and walked over to the window, looking out at the dimly lit street. The weight of bills and endless work hours rested heavily on her shoulders. She worked 2 jobs to make ends meet, often skipping meals so Lily could have hers. But no matter how hard life got, she had made one promise to herself. She would raise Lily to be kind. "Kindness will take you further than anything else," she often told her daughter. And Lily, with her big brown eyes and a heart full of love, took those words seriously. That evening, as the sun set over the town, Lily crawled into bed beside her mother. She looked up at Sarah with sleepy eyes and whispered, "Mama, can we help someone tomorrow?" Sarah chuckled softly, brushing a strand of hair from Lily's face. "What do you mean, sweetheart?" "Someone who's sad. Like you say, kindness can help people, right?" Sarah's heart swelled with pride. "Yes, my love. Kindness can do amazing things. Now sleep, and we'll see what tomorrow brings." As Lily drifted off to sleep, Sarah stared at the ceiling, her mind filled with thoughts. She had so little to give, yet Lily's pure heart reminded her that even small acts of kindness could make a difference. Back in the city, Shaq sat alone in his sprawling mansion, staring at an old photograph of his mother. She had been his rock, his guide, his anchor. "You got to keep your feet on the ground, son," she had always told him. "No matter how high you go." But somewhere along the way, he had lost touch with himself. Now, despite the cheering crowds and constant demands for selfies, he felt like a stranger in his own life. He placed the photo down and leaned back in his chair, staring up at the ceiling. He knew he couldn't go on like this. Something needed to change. Little did he know, a tiny town and a little girl with a big heart was about to change everything. Shaquille O'Neal, sat at his kitchen table staring at the travel brochures scattered in front of him. Each one displayed images of picturesque landscapes, small towns, and quiet cabins tucked away in the wilderness. He traced a finger over one brochure, his eyes lingering on a photo of a peaceful lake surrounded by tall trees. It wasn't like him to run away. For years, Shaq had faced challenges head-on, whether it was on the basketball court or in life. But this time, he didn't feel like fighting. He needed a break. After some thought, he made his decision. He'd rent a small cabin in a quiet town where no one would recognize him. No cameras, no crowds, no noise, just peace. A week later, Shaq found himself in a sleepy town far removed from the bustling city life he was used to. The streets were lined with mom-and-pop shops, and the tallest building was the town hall, which stood no higher than 3 stories. It was the kind of place where everyone knew everyone else, and newcomers were rare. Shaq kept his head down as he walked through the small grocery store, wearing a wide-brimmed hat and oversized sunglasses. It wasn't easy for a man of his stature to blend in, but the townsfolk seemed to respect his space, offering polite nods and quick smiles without lingering. He spent most of his days in solitude, walking through the park or sitting on a bench by the pond. The quiet was a welcome change, but the loneliness persisted. One sunny afternoon, Shaq sat on his usual bench in the park, his large frame hunched over as he stared at the water. Children played nearby, their laughter echoing through the air, but he felt no inclination to join in. His thoughts were heavy, swirling with doubts and regrets. "Why does it still feel like something's missing?" he muttered under his breath. Across the park, 6-year-old Lily was skipping beside her mother, Sarah. They had come to the park to enjoy a rare day off together, with Sarah carrying a small picnic bag filled with sandwiches and juice. As they passed the pond, Lily stopped abruptly, her gaze fixed on the man sitting alone on the bench. "Mama," she whispered, tugging on Sarah's hand. "That man looks sad." Sarah followed Lily's gaze and saw Shaq. His shoulders were slumped, and there was a heaviness about him that even Sarah, who didn't know him, could sense. "He's just sitting there, sweetie," Sarah said softly. "Maybe he's just tired." "No," Lily insisted, her voice filled with conviction. "He's sad. I can feel it." Sarah knelt down to Lily's level, brushing a strand of hair from her daughter's face. "What do you want to do, Lily?" Lily hesitated, glancing at the picnic bag. "Can I give him my sandwich? Maybe it'll make him happy." Sarah's heart ached at her daughter's generosity. Money was tight, and every sandwich mattered, but she couldn't bring herself to say no. "Okay," Sarah said, her voice soft. "Go ahead, but be polite." Lily beamed and grabbed her sandwich, skipping over to the bench where Shaq sat. Shaq didn't notice her at first. He was too lost in his thoughts, his eyes fixed on the water. "Excuse me, mister?" The tiny voice startled him. He looked up to see a little girl standing in front of him, holding out a slightly squished peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Her big brown eyes were full of kindness. "What's this?" he asked, his deep voice gentle but surprised. "It's for you," Lily said simply. "You look sad. My mama says sandwiches can make people feel better." Shaq blinked, taken aback by her honesty. He stared at the sandwich for a moment before reaching out and taking it. "Thank you," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "That's really nice of you." Lily smiled, her innocence shining through. "It's okay. You're welcome. I hope you feel better soon." Before Shaq could respond, Lily skipped back to her mother, who was waiting nearby. He looked down at the sandwich in his hands, a lump forming in his throat. It was such a small gesture, but it had cracked open something inside him, a warmth he hadn't felt in weeks. As Lily and Sarah left the park, Sarah glanced back at Shaq. He was still sitting on the bench, but this time, he wasn't hunched over. He was sitting up straighter, the sandwich resting in his lap. "You did a good thing, Lily," Sarah said, squeezing her daughter's hand. Lily grinned. "I just wanted him to smile." And for the first time in a long time, Shaq did. The next morning, Shaq woke up feeling different. The little girl from the park, with her kind eyes and warm smile, had lingered in his mind all night. Something about her gesture, the simplicity of offering a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, had struck a chord deep within him. It wasn't about the sandwich itself, it was about the thought behind it. He sat by the window of his cabin sipping his coffee as the morning sun streamed in. Outside, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and the sound of birds chirping filled the air. It was peaceful, yet his thoughts were anything but quiet. Why did that little moment feel so big, he murmured to himself. Shaq had experienced grand gestures from fans, elaborate gifts, heartfelt letters, and even tears from those who admired him. But this small act of kindness from a little girl in a small town felt more genuine than anything he had experienced in years. Later that day, Lily was back in the park with her mother. Sarah sat on a blanket reading a book, while Lily played nearby with a few kids she had befriended. As Lily chased a ball across the grass, she noticed Shaq sitting on the same bench as before. This time, he wasn't hunched over. He was leaning back, his face turned toward the sun. Lily ran back to her mother. "Mama, the man is here again." Sarah glanced up from her book. "Maybe he likes this park too, sweetheart." Lily hesitated, then asked, "Can I go talk to him again?" Sarah looked at her daughter, her heart swelling with pride at Lily's kindness. "All right," she said. "But be polite, and don't bother him too much, okay?" Lily nodded eagerly and skipped over to the bench. Shaq noticed her approach this time. He smiled faintly as she stopped in front of him, her hands clasped behind her back. "Hi," she said brightly. "Hey there," Shaq replied, his deep voice soft. "You're the sandwich girl, right?" Lily giggled. "Yep. Did you like it?" Shaq chuckled. "I did. Best peanut butter and jelly sandwich I've ever had." Lily beamed. "My mama makes the best ones. She puts a little extra jelly so it's not too dry." "Smart mama," Shaq said, nodding. "What's your name, kid?" "Lily," she said proudly. "What's yours?" Shaq hesitated. He wasn't ready to reveal who he was. "Just call me—" "Big guy," he said with a grin. Lily giggled again. "Okay, big guy. Why were you sad yesterday?" The question caught him off guard. He looked down at the little girl, her innocent eyes searching his face. "I guess sometimes even big guys feel small," he said after a moment. Lily tilted her head, thinking. "My mama says when I feel small I should talk to someone. That helps." Shaq smiled. "Your mama sounds like a wise lady." "She is," Lily said enthusiastically. "Do you want to meet her? She's right over there." Before Shaq could respond, Lily grabbed his hand and started pulling him toward Sarah. Sarah looked up from her book to see Lily leading the large man toward their blanket. Her heart raced for a moment. He was so big and imposing, but the gentle expression on his face put her at ease. "Hi, Mama," Lily said cheerfully. "This is Big Guy." Shaq extended a hand toward Sarah. "Hi, I'm Big Guy," he said with a chuckle. Sarah shook his hand, her small one dwarfed by his. "Nice to meet you, Big Guy. I hope Lily hasn't been bothering you." "Not at all," Shaq said. "She's one of the kindest people I've met in a long time." Sarah smiled warmly. "She has a big heart. She gets that from her father." They sat and talked for a while, with Lily chiming in occasionally. Shaq learned that Sarah was a single mother, working 2 jobs to provide for Lily, and Sarah learned that Shaq was staying in town to take a break from his busy life. By the time the sun began to set, Shaq felt lighter than he had in weeks. For the first time, He felt like he wasn't just a famous name or a public figure. He was just a person, sitting on a blanket with new friends. As he walked back to his cabin that evening, Shaq thought about Lily's question. Why had he been sad? The answer wasn't simple, but one thing was clear. Lily's small act of kindness had sparked something inside him, a desire to reconnect with the things that truly mattered. He smiled to himself. Maybe he wasn't as lost as he thought. The days passed quietly in the little town, and Shaq began to look forward to his afternoons at the park. He still went unnoticed by most of the locals, but Lily and Sarah had become an important part of his routine. Sitting with them, sharing simple conversations and watching Lily play, reminded him of the joy in ordinary moments. One morning, Sarah sat at their small kitchen table with a cup of coffee in hand. Lily was still asleep, her tiny frame curled up under a blanket on the couch. It was her favorite spot to nap after waking early to watch cartoons. Sarah opened the mail and then reached for an old magazine that had come from her sister in the city. She flipped through its glossy pages absent-mindedly until something caught her eye. There, in bold letters, was the name Shaquille O'Neal, accompanied by a photo of a towering man in a basketball jersey. Sarah froze, her heart racing. She stared at the photo, her mind working to piece everything together. The man in the park, the one Lily had dubbed Big Guy, wasn't just a friendly stranger. He was Shaquille O'Neal, one of the most famous basketball players in the world. Later that day, Sarah and Lily were back in the park. While Lily played, Sarah sat on the blanket, still turning the revelation over in her mind. She hadn't told Lily yet. When Shaq arrived, wearing his usual oversized hat and sunglasses, Sarah greeted him with a warm but knowing smile. "Good afternoon, big guy," she said, her tone light but deliberate. Shaq chuckled, sensing something different in her voice. "Afternoon. How's Lily doing today?" "She's great, as always," Sarah said. She paused, then added, "I was reading a magazine this morning and I think I might have seen someone who looks a lot like you." Shaq stiffened slightly but tried to keep his expression neutral. "Oh yeah? Who's that?" Sarah raised an eyebrow playfully. "Shaquille O'Neal. Ever heard of him?" For a moment Shaq said nothing. Then he sighed, removing his sunglasses and tipping his hat back. "Yeah," he admitted. "That's me." Sarah nodded, her suspicion confirmed. "I thought so." Shaq's shoulders relaxed slightly. "You're not surprised?" "I'm surprised you're here, but I'm not about to treat you any differently," Sarah said with a smile. "Lily doesn't even know who you are. To her, you're just the nice man who liked her sandwich." Shaq laughed at that, feeling a sense of relief. "Well, I guess that's a good thing. Fame can complicate things, you know?" "I can imagine," Sarah replied, "but I think it's brave of you to step away from all of that and come here. Sometimes we all need a break." Meanwhile, Lily had overheard part of their conversation. She ran over to them, her curiosity piqued. "Are you famous, big guy?" she asked, her big brown eyes wide with wonder. Shaq looked down at her, unsure of how to respond. "Well, kind of, yeah." Lily tilted her head. "Like a movie star?" "No, not like that," Shaq said with a chuckle. "I used to play basketball. A lot of people know me because of that." Lily frowned, thinking hard. "You don't seem like someone famous. You just seem like you." Shaq smiled, touched by her innocence. "That's the nicest thing anyone said to me in a long time, Lily." That night, as they walked home from the park, Lily tugged on her mother's sleeve. "Mama, is Big Guy really famous?" she asked. "Yes, he is," Sarah said. "He's a big legend in basketball." Lily considered this for a moment. "He didn't look like a legend when I met him. He looked like someone who needed a friend." Sarah stopped and knelt down to face her daughter. "And That's exactly what you gave him, sweetheart. You didn't care who he was or how famous he might be. You just saw someone who needed kindness. That's what makes you so special. Lily smiled, hugging her mother tightly. Do you think I helped him, Mama? Sarah kissed the top of her daughter's head. I know you did. Back in his cabin, Shaq sat on the porch, staring up at the stars. He thought about Lily's words and the way Sarah had treated him like any other person. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a celebrity or a brand. He felt like himself. And that was a feeling he hadn't realized he was missing. A week after the conversation in the park, Shaq found himself pacing his small cabin. His hands were full, a large basket overflowing with chocolates, toys, flowers, and even a few small stuffed animals. It was his way of showing gratitude, though he worried it might feel over the top. Just keep it simple, he told himself, adjusting the bow on the basket. Shaq wasn't one to overthink gestures like this, but Lily and Sarah had stirred something deep inside him. It wasn't just about the sandwich or their kindness. It was about how they had seen him, not as a celebrity, but as a person. With the basket in hand, he climbed into his car and drove the short distance to Sarah and Lily's apartment. When Sarah opened the door, she looked surprised to see him standing there. "Big guy," Lily exclaimed from behind her, rushing to the door. "Hey, Lily," Shaq said with a wide grin, holding up the basket. "I brought something for you." "For me?" Lily's eyes lit up as she looked at the colorful basket. "Well, for you and your mom," Shaq said, stepping inside. Sarah hesitated. "Shaq, this is so much. You didn't have to—" "I wanted to," Shaq interrupted gently. "It's my way of saying thank you. You both have been so kind to me." Lily took the basket eagerly, sitting on the floor to explore its contents. She pulled out a small stuffed bunny, holding it up with delight. "Mama, look, it's so cute." Sarah smiled, her heart warming at the sight of her daughter's joy. "Thank you, Shaq. This means a lot." They sat down in the living room and Lily climbed onto the couch beside Shaq, clutching the stuffed bunny. "Why were you sad when I first saw you?" she asked suddenly, her innocent question catching him off guard. Shaq hesitated, glancing at Sarah, who gave him a small nod, as if to say, "It's okay." "Well," he began, "sometimes when you've been busy for a long time, you forget to take care of yourself. I've spent years doing a lot of things for other people, but I didn't realize I was feeling kind of empty inside." "Like your heart needed a hug?" Lily asked, her eyes wide with understanding. Shaq chuckled softly. "Yeah, something like that. And then you came along with your sandwich, and it felt like someone, finally, gave my heart that hug." Lily leaned forward and hugged him tightly. "Then I'll give you another one." Shaq laughed, his deep voice filling the small apartment. "Thanks, kid. I think that's just what I needed." They spent the evening together, sharing stories and laughter. Shaq told Lily about his basketball days, though he kept it simple for her young mind, and shared some funny moments from his life. Sarah watched them from the kitchen as she prepared tea. Seeing her daughter so happy and carefree made her heart swell with gratitude. Shaq's presence was larger than life, but in that moment, he was just a man sitting in their modest living room, connecting with a little girl who had reminded him of the power of kindness. Before he left, Shaq reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you, Sarah," he said, handing it to her. Sarah frowned, hesitant to take it. "Shaq, you've already done so much. Please," he said gently, his voice sincere. "It's not just a gift. It's a thank you. You've raised an incredible kid, and that's not easy to do. This is for both of you." Sarah opened the envelope, her eyes widening as she saw the check inside. It was more money than she had ever held in her hands, enough to pay off her debts and secure Lily's education. Tears filled her eyes. I don't know what to say." Shaq placed a hand on her shoulder. "Just keep being the amazing mom you are." As he drove back to his cabin that night, Shaq felt lighter than he had in years. For the first time, he felt like he wasn't running from something, he was running toward something. And in that little apartment, Lily hugged her stuffed bunny tightly as Sarah wiped her tears, knowing their lives had been forever changed by an act of kindness that had started with a simple sandwich. The following weeks passed by in a blur of change for both Shaq and the small family. For Shaq, his days in the little town had allowed him to rediscover a part of himself he thought he had lost. His ability to connect with others without the glare of cameras or the weight of his fame. He returned to his public life, but something had shifted in him. He no longer craved the spotlight as much as he once had. Instead, he was drawn to the simple moments, the ones that made him feel like a human being rather than a brand. For Sarah and Lily, life felt different too. Sarah was no longer worried about paying the bills or how she would afford school for Lily. The check from Shaq had now allowed them to pay off their debts and secure Lily's future education, something Sarah had been desperately trying to plan for. It was a weight lifted, a relief that she hadn't known she needed until it was gone. As for Lily, she hadn't quite understood the significance of the check at first, but she understood something more important: the kindness of strangers and how small acts of generosity could change lives. One afternoon, Sarah sat at the kitchen table, her hands resting on the check that Shaq had given her. She thought about how their lives had shifted because of one man's simple yet profound decision to act out of kindness. Later that day, Lily skipped into the room, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "Mama, guess what I learned today?" Sarah smiled. "What, sweetheart?" "We talked about kindness in school, and our teacher said it's like a circle that keeps going. If you're kind to someone, they're kind to someone else, and then that person is kind to someone else." Sarah's heart swelled with pride as she looked at her daughter. "You're right. Kindness is like a ripple that spreads out farther than we can see." Lily thought for a moment before adding, "Maybe I'll start a kindness club. I could give everyone peanut butter and jelly sandwiches." Sarah laughed. "I think that's a great idea, sweetie." That evening, Sarah sat down to write a thank you note to Shaq. She carefully chose her words, knowing that nothing could truly express how much his gesture had meant. But she had to try. "Dear Shaq, I can hardly find the words to thank you for everything you've done for us. The kindness you've shown us, first with the sandwich and then with your incredible gift, has changed our lives in ways I can't even begin to explain. Lily and I will never forget how you made us feel seen and valued. You didn't just help us financially, you reminded us that kindness is the most powerful thing in the world. Thank you for believing in the goodness of others. You've left a mark on our hearts, and we will carry that with us forever. With all our gratitude, Sarah and Lily." After writing the note, Sarah sealed it in an envelope and dropped it in the mailbox the next morning. She didn't expect anything in return. But there was something about the act of sending her gratitude into the world that made her feel connected to something bigger than herself. A week later, Shaq received the note from Sarah, and, as he read it, he felt the familiar lump form in his throat. He had given them so much, and yet they had given him so much more. The note was a reminder of how important it was to be seen and valued, not as a celebrity, but as a person. In the months that followed, Shaq continued to tell the story of Lily and her sandwich. He shared it in interviews, in speeches, and even in his personal life. He wanted people to understand that kindness didn't require grand gestures or a spotlight. It simply required an open heart. And as Shaq returned to his busy schedule, he never forgot the small town, the kind little girl, and the lesson they had taught him, that sometimes the greatest gift we can give is simply to show up for one another. For Sarah and Lily, life continued with a new sense of hope. Sarah had been able to pay off her bills, and Lily continued to grow into a thoughtful, generous young girl. They still lived simply, but their hearts were full in a way they had never experienced before. The encounter with Shaq had changed everything, but it was not just about the material gift. It was about the gift of kindness, a gift that kept on giving, even after the moment had passed. Shaq had returned to his life in the public eye, but something inside him had shifted. His time in the small town had given him more than just a break from fame. It had reminded him of the importance of the simplest acts of kindness. He had often been asked by fans what it was like to be famous, to play for NBA championships, to live a life of wealth and success. But in the past few months, no question had moved him more than Lily's simple one. Why were you sad? That question had become a constant echo in his mind. It reminded him that no matter how high you climb, you can't forget what it feels like to need someone, to crave connection, and to long for understanding. Shaq had decided that he would share the story of Lily and her sandwich with as many people as he could. He wanted others to understand that kindness, no matter how small, had the power to change lives. It wasn't about fame or recognition. It was about how our actions ripple out and affect the people around us. During an interview for a new charity campaign, Shaq found himself talking about Lily and her kindness. The host, a well-known sports anchor, had asked him about his charitable work and the impact he had made on the world. The table, taking Lily's hand in hers. And that's the most important promise you could ever make. Shaq, too, had noticed the ripple effect his story had created. He often received messages from people who had been touched by his words, telling him how they had started small acts of kindness in their own communities. It was clear that Lily's simple sandwich had sparked something much larger than he had ever anticipated. He was often invited to speak at schools, sharing his story and encouraging kids to embrace kindness and empathy. And at each of those schools, he would talk about Lily, the little girl who had reminded him of the simple power of giving. One afternoon, while speaking at a school assembly, a young boy raised his hand and asked, "Do you think we can all be legends like you?" Shaq smiled and leaned into the microphone. "You don't need to be famous to be a legend. You just need to be kind." Months later, Shaq received a letter in the mail. It was from Lily and Sarah. He recognized the handwriting immediately and eagerly opened the envelope. "Dear Shaq, we hope this letter finds you well. We just wanted to thank you again for everything you've done for us. Not only did you change our lives with your gift, but you also changed the way we see the world." Lily started a kindness club at school, and she's already given out over 100 peanut butter and jelly sandwiches to people in need. She says that kindness is like a boomerang. It always comes back. We're so grateful for you, Shaq. You showed us what it truly means to be a legend. With love and thanks, Sarah and Lily Shaq read the letter with tears in his eyes. It was the most meaningful thank you he had ever received. As he sat back in his chair, he realized something. While his fame had opened doors for him, it was moments like these, the small, quiet moments of human connection, that had brought him the most fulfillment. The ripple effect of kindness had not only changed Sarah and Lily's lives, it had changed his, too. The story of Shaq and the little girl with the sandwich continued to live on, not just in news stories or social media posts, but in the hearts of everyone who heard it. And, as the years passed, both Shaq and Lily kept spreading the message of kindness, knowing that even the smallest gestures could create waves that changed the world. Subscribe Storyboat for more upcoming heartwarming stories like this.